If you're going to Disney World and want to know all the details about It's a Small World, this is the video for you.
Hi, I'm Susan from Moms Make It Magical, and if you're new here, I talk all about Disney and family travel with highly sensitive kids. Today we're going to cover all the ride details about It's a Small World. There's so many things at Disney World that can trigger sensory overload meltdowns. Things like noise, being in the dark, bright lights, drops and speed, getting wet, etc. And it might not seem like a big deal at first, but if it's adding up throughout the day and your kid already has a sensitive nervous system, it can end up being too much. So it's impossible to avoid meltdowns completely, but being well informed and prepared to know what you're getting yourself into can still make a big difference. If you're hoping to not see spoilers, you need to stop this video right now. In my opinion, there isn't such thing as spoilers with highly sensitive children. The more they know, the better they can handle it. But if you want all the sensory info about It's a Small World, then keep on watching. And make sure you stick around to the end of the video to hear the final sensory rating and score and my overall thoughts. So It's a Small World is located in the Fantasyland section of Magic Kingdom, right across from Peter Pan's Flight and next to Pinocchio Village House, which is a quick service restaurant that actually overlooks the ride. There are multiple variations of this ride across Disney theme parks around the world, and originally It's a Small World was created for the New York World's Fair in 1964-1965, where it became a huge hit. From there, it was shipped to Disneyland Park in Anaheim, California, where it opened on May 28th, 1966. So the Disneyland version of this ride is really considered the OG. The Walt Disney World version was an opening day attraction at Magic Kingdom, with guests starting to ride this on October 1st, 1971. So I'd say that it's still considered a pretty iconic ride at Disney World. So It's a Small World is a slow-moving, smooth boat ride through different parts of the world, and it features over 300 audio animatronic dolls of various cultures, with the timeless song, "It's a Small World After All," playing repeatedly in the background. The boats themselves consist of 6 rows, with each row fitting about 3 to 5 people, and the ride duration is about 10 to 11 minutes long, which is on the longer end when it comes to Disney World attractions. It is included in Disney World's Lightning Lane multi-pass system, which is a way to skip the standby line and access the Lightning Lane, which can get you onto attractions a little bit faster, but it probably is not considered the best pick for an advanced selection, as It's a Small World typically doesn't see super high wait times. It does not have any height requirement, so that means even babies and toddlers can ride this, but I want to reiterate that it's important to consider more than just height requirement when it comes to attractions, especially if you have a highly sensitive, a sensory sensitive, or anxious child. So let's jump into 10 different sensory factors that might affect whether your family will enjoy this ride. It's actually really common for a highly sensitive child to be scared of sudden noises, but thankfully this isn't a huge concern on this ride. It's a Small World is definitely more of a ride with constant noise as opposed to sudden noises, and this is due to the repetition of that timeless song through the entire duration, and this is why I give this just a 1 out of 5. I like to differentiate between sudden noises and noise level, because noise level is more about the volume, and this ride would not be what it is without the infamous song. And from what I've seen, it's kind of a love it or hate it situation from both adults and kids alike. If you're curious, I personally love it and don't mind the song being stuck in my head all day long. But this is exactly why I would rate the noise level at a 3. It is not a quiet ride by any means. The song playing loudly on loop might be too much for some little ears, or even some adult ones too if you're part of the hate it camp. It's a Small World is not what I would consider a super dark ride. Most of the scenes are lit brightly enough to see all the animatronics dancing and singing around you, but I will note that this one section that you see right now that features Australia, New Zealand, and the Polynesian Islands had a little bit of a darker color palette than the other sections, but overall, kids with a fear of the dark should be fine on this ride. So bright lights can be really problematic for some people with visual sensory sensitivities, and while this ride is very colorful and there are lots of moving parts, bright and flashing lights are not something to worry about here. There aren't even sudden transitions between darker areas and brightly lit sections. There are spotlights and light effects that are used on the animatronics, but it's generally not too painful for sensitive eyes. So if you have a cautious child, speed might be something that generates fear on Disney attractions. But as I already mentioned, It's a Small World is a slow-moving boat ride, so it moves at a pretty consistent, slow pace throughout. There aren't really any major speed concerns here. I would just watch for this loading and unloading area. It can feel a little jolting when transitioning out of the water onto the bumpy rollers after a mostly smooth ride, and occasionally boats may bump into each other as you enter the unloading area or if there are some backups, but really there are no major speed concerns here. If your kids are easily motion sick, dislike swings or slides at the playground, or experience dizziness, they might have an extra sensitive vestibular system. And if you relate to this, your kids might dislike the sensation of dropping on Disney attractions. But thankfully, this ride does not contain any drops at all. The ride moves through the different scenes without any drops or unexpected movements, and it's very tame in terms of any thrill factor. So what's scary to one child isn't always scary to another, but I would say it's fairly common for highly sensitive children to dislike visuals related to conflict, villains, or violence, and there is none of that on It's a Small World. The section that features Australia, New Zealand, and the Polynesian Islands did have a variety of large tiki masks, and that could be scary to some kids. If anyone in your group has a fear of dolls, which is not entirely uncommon, this would probably be their worst nightmare. My youngest child was scared of moving and talking toys, and he was definitely a little bit scared and overwhelmed on his first ride through of It's a Small World. But besides that specific section and being fearful of moving dolls, the visual scenes here are overall very pleasant. The ride is trying to promote a happy world where people of all cultures get along, so there isn't anything overtly scary. Being in crowded places and close proximity to others can be really overwhelming for highly sensitive children. On It's a Small World, there are several rows of seating on these boats, and they will seat your party together in these rows. So there's a very low likelihood of being squashed in like sardines and having to be in close proximity to complete strangers on the ride. The queue itself is also not too crowded. It is pretty bright and airy here, and it is kind of open to the outside. So if your child tends to feel a little bit claustrophobic in like dark enclosed spaces, you don't have to worry about that here either. So Disney is known to use the sense of smell to make their attractions even more immersive without you fully realizing it. And in this case, I don't really recall any strong or unpleasant smells, so this shouldn't be an issue. I have heard that some people have noticed the smell from the water, and there is a certain scent from boat rides at Disney, but I personally haven't really noticed it too much, and it shouldn't be too much of an issue. So for some children, the sensory input of getting wet, especially getting wet unexpectedly, could be too much. And while It's a Small World is a boat ride, you will not be getting wet at all. My middle child was a little bit scared of getting splashed after having ridden Frozen Ever After, but after multiple reassurances and realizing that we wouldn't be getting wet, he was fine. So yeah, it's a boat ride, but you don't need to worry about actually getting wet at all. So our total sensory score here is 10 out of 50. And how we understand this rating is that a lower number means less sensory overload, and a higher number means a greater chance of being overwhelmed or overstimulated. And I created this kind of rating system to have kind of helpful data points for deciding which rides might cause sensory overload and meltdowns in our sensitive kids. I will say that It's a Small World is generally a good starter ride for families newer to the Disney parks. It has a happy tone with all the colors and the iconic design from Mary Blair. The music has a positive and uplifting message, though I know it can be annoying on repeat for some people. It's not at all dark or super loud or startling. There aren't any villains present or any overt conflict, and you can sit comfortably with your own travel party, and there are no restraints or lap bars that you have to use. And because it doesn't have a minimum height requirement, it's great for the whole family to ride together. So that's all the good. I would just be mindful of the overall auditory stimulation, as it is truly constant throughout the entire ride. And it is not a short ride by any means, so that can be a lot. There is also a lot of visual stimulation as well, with all the dolls and moving parts and dancing and spinning. So if any of your kids have ever been scared by moving and dancing toys in the toy aisle, which I have experienced myself, I would expect some hesitation and fear from them on It's a Small World. Have you ever been on It's a Small World? What has your experience been? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date with all my newest videos. And let's connect on socials. I'm on Instagram, Pinterest, and Facebook. And be sure to download my free Disney Ride Planner tool. You can find it in the description. You can use it to keep track of which attractions you want to avoid and which ones you want to try as you watch these videos. It will make planning your park days way, way easier. Thanks again for being here. Let's keep making magical memories with our families.